Hi, I'm Lil.
And I'm Fitz.
And you're listening to Knock Once for Yes.
Hello, everybody. We are on a roll. Hot on the heels of our Hitchin episode, we're back in the studio to bring you some more spooky stories. We're still in the Pokey studio, but we're chomping at the bit to get the new one up and ready. I'm childishly excited about it and driving Lil mad with my bouncy enthusiasm.
I'm excited too. I'm just not being quite so tiggerish about it. Well, Fitz, what have we got coming up on today's episode?
A new cryptid is spotted in our neck of the woods, and there's a ghost dropping F-bombs on the Paranormal Radar. Listener stories from Caroline, Matt, Vix and Lenny, and we pin down the master of puns himself, Paul Stevenson, editor of Haunted Magazine, to chat about all things spooky.
But before we get stuck into all of that, we want to say a huge thank you to our newest patrons.
Megan Paulak and Simon Lear.
Thank you so much also to Harriet Canidas and Sasha Louise for supporting us through KOFY.
And to Travis Osterhaus, who is supporting us through Repod and Patreon and practically every other option that he's got to help us out. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, Travis.
And it was wonderful to see you in our latest Patron Zoom.
Yeah, we really love these Patron Zooms. And the last one we just had a fantastic catch-up. We talked about some of the ghost stories that didn't make it to the Hitchin episodes and lots more besides. If you're a Patreon supporter and you missed it, don't forget you can catch up with the recording through Patreon and on Repod. And if you fancy seeing what kind of bonus content we do for our supporters, at the moment, if you hop on over to our new platform over on Repod, which we're really enjoying, you can actually trial a supporter subscription to us for 1 month for free.
Yep, all you need to do is enter the code FRIENDS at checkout and you'll get 1 month's access for free.
So as always, we want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of our supporters across all of our platforms, old and new. We simply couldn't do this show without you, and we love making it, so we're so grateful to have you along on this spooky journey. And if you don't want to commit to supporting us with a monthly donation, you could help us out with our new studio build as we try and make a bigger, better and more efficient and appropriate space to record and bring you more and better content. But building a new studio, apart from anything else, requires an incredible amount of cables. Cables like you can never imagine.
So many cables.
So many cables. And so we've got quite a lot to buy for the new studio build, and we've made an Amazon wish list. Now, this is our actual shopping list, but if anybody does want to just chip in just a little bit by buying us a cable or a cable tie or a plug or anything, basically, that everything helps because there are so many cables.
Cables, connectors, there's even some pretty lights, so if you get something it might even appear on a Zoom or a live stream or something that we're doing.
Pretty lights.
You can find the link to that along with references to everything we discuss in the show on the show notes on the website.
And now let's get stuck into the spooky stories. So Fitz, I believe you have a cryptid on the Paranormal Radar.
Indeed, the Paranormal Radar pinged quite close to home this episode as our local news reported a potentially new cryptid in our neck of the woods. North Ants Live recently posted the story of a 6-foot man-goat being spotted just outside the village of Staverton in our home county of Northamptonshire in the early hours of the morning on the 20th of February. They were reporting on a post from the web forum Mumsnet, and in the original forum post, the user described their encounter, which took place during a 2 a.m. drive home along a rural A road in the Midlands. The area was surrounded by fields and woodlands, with no houses or buildings within at least a mile of the location. Suddenly, the witnesses saw something cross the road in front of their car, something standing at around 6 foot tall or more, with short, powerful legs and hips that seemed to move in a circular fluid motion. Something that couldn't have been a deer because it was standing on 2 legs. The strange creature was illuminated by the car's headlights for a full 3 seconds as it crossed in front of them. In the witnesses' own words, they said, "The closest we can describe is a large man-goat on hind legs, but really stocky ones." They described the colour as dark brown, although they said it was tricky to tell in the full beam of their headlights. The next day, the witnesses returned to inspect the scene in daylight to see if they could discover any clues. They reported that the area it had moved off into from the road was a wide bowl-shaped field that led down to a stream, but they noted there were no animals in the surrounding fields, which left them no closer to understanding what they'd witnessed. There were hundreds of responses to the original poster, with most seeming to think that it was either a kangaroo, wallaby or bear, none of which are really known to be regularly encountered in Britain, but there were also quite a few supernatural suggestions such as Bigfoot and Slender Man. I was highly amused by the original poster's reply to some of these suggestions though, when they said, "Not a kangaroo, goat man, slender man, Sasquatch, these things don't exist." Even doing what we do, I'm not going to call someone out for not believing in things like Sasquatch, especially in the UK, but I did have to have a bit of a giggle at the suggestion that kangaroos were some kind of mythical creature. Even staying in the realms of the mythical though, whilst we do have our own version of Bigfoot and the quite similar woodwoes, Black Shuck obviously and other local cryptids, the goat man isn't something we come across all too often in our green and pleasant land. In fact, a cursory search seems to imply that the goat man is a mostly North American phenomena, with notable examples being the Lake Worth monster in Texas and the famous Pope Lick monster in Kentucky. What is it with Kentucky, by the way? You guys really seem like you've got a lot of cryptids, aliens and other weird stuff going on there. It also appears that there are quite a few followers of the old gods on Mumsnet, as there was more than one mention of it possibly being Pan, an ancient Greek god of nature who had the upper body of a man, but the hindquarters, legs and horns of a goat.
So doing our due diligence, a quick look at that area on Google Earth reveals that whilst there may not have been any animals in the fields immediately next to that section of road, a mere few hundred metres further along the road is a deer park. But saying that, you obviously don't get many deer wandering around on their hind legs, so that doesn't really explain it. And what I was looking for on the map really was a zoo or wild animal park that could account for an escaped animal, something that you wouldn't expect to see on an English A-road. But there were none that I could find. I did spot the same thing that the original poster had also picked up on though, and that is that the nearest village to the location is called Shuckburgh. Now you've got to imagine that there must be something in the village's history, lore or legend that led to that village being named after one of the most famous cryptids in England. So, was this a modern-day sighting of Shuck himself? It's not your usual Shuck description to be sure, but in many legends he turns from a man into a beast, so perhaps this witness caught him halfway transformed.
Do you know, I struggled a bit with this because I looked into it and I found that Shuckburgh was named after, Shuckburgh Hall was named after the family, Lord and Lady Shuckburgh, so they'd taken their name. But when I tried to look up their name, they'd taken their name from the village. So I got into this sort of recursive loop of bouncing back between village and people trying to work out where it came from.
Oh, wow.
But it seems that Shuck is an ancient Norman name that came to England after the Norman conquest in 1066. And the Shuck family moved to Warwickshire and obviously gave their name to the village. So potentially we've got a sort of Norman Shuck that's come over from now France to Britain and has taken up residence. Shuck derives from the Old English word skucker, meaning goblin or demon. And obviously bird means hill, so it's Goblin Hill.
Goblin Hill. So maybe there is something a little bit strange and mysterious about the village of Shuckburgh after all. I think we may have to go out there at some point and give it a little look.
Oh, definitely. And as usual, links to the article can be found on the show notes on our website. Sadly, there aren't any pictures, but do take a look and let us know what you think. For our next story on the Paranormal Radar, we're off down south to Somerset and the rather beautiful Quantock Hills, where we will find the somewhat less appealing sounding Dead Woman's Ditch. Walkers on the hills have seen the apparition of a lady in white and a tall figure in a long dark coat in the area around the ditch. Also frequently reported is the sound of a lady telling people to, go away, but with a little bit more impoliteness. Many believe that the ghost of Dead Woman's Ditch is a lady called Jane Shawnee, and to find out why, we have to head back to the late 18th century, where we initially find a rather fetching chap called John Walford, who worked as a charcoal burner and came from a respectable family. He was much enamoured of a lady called Anne Rice, and no, not that Anne Rice, who lived in nearby Nether Stowey. She apparently reciprocated his feelings, and they came to an understanding that they would one day marry. Incidentally, does anyone else think Nether Stowey sounds a lot like a euphemism for something that will shortly become relevant in our story? Anyway, so far so mundane, but during their engagement, John managed to get another woman pregnant. Perhaps unsurprisingly at this point, Anne called off their engagement, whilst John was taken into custody and advised he could either marry the lady who bore his child, one Jane Shawnee, or he would be forced to pay for the upkeep of his illegitimate child. John chose to marry Jane, and the fact that she was already pregnant with his second child at this point might lead you to believe that he was perhaps not too upset with his situation. But you would be wrong. Just 10 days after their wedding, John was heard plotting to sneak away and make a new life in London. A few days later, the couple visited the Castle of Comfort in Doddington, which incidentally is still a hotel of the same name today. However, only John was to return home, alone, shortly after midnight, which you might be thinking seemed a tiny bit suspicious. And you would be correct. The body of Jane would be discovered the next morning covered in broken branches in Dead Woman's Ditch, and John, not apparently much blessed with forethought or indeed morals, was discovered in his cottage with a blood-stained knife and breeches. Apparently, of all the items that might link him to the crime, he thought hiding only his muddy stockings in the thatch of his cottage would be sufficient to claim innocence. It didn't take long for him to confess to the murder, and following a trial he was sentenced to death. Strangely, everyone seems to be terribly cordial with John just prior to his execution, even Anne Rice, his ex-fiancée, who turned up to say goodbye, and incidentally was also somehow pregnant with John's child as well. Following his execution, John's body was hung in a gibbet directly opposite his parents' house, which I personally find unnecessarily cruel, as whatever their son had done was no reason to punish them for it. Anyway, this spawned a ghost story of its own, as it said that the footsteps of John can be heard pacing restlessly at the site where his body was encased in the gibbet all those years ago. So, is Jane the foul-mouthed ghost that haunts Dead Woman's Ditch? Probably not. It seems that Jane's body wasn't actually found in the ditch, but instead close to a turnpike, and the nail in the coffin, so to speak, is that a map published 7 years before Jane's murder already shows the ditch being called Dead Woman's Ditch. So, we may never know who the ditch was named for, but perhaps that's what she's so upset about.
So, let me get this straight. He went back to his house, kept the bloody knife, still wearing trousers covered in blood, but he thought he'd get away with it if he hid his slightly dirty, grubby, muddy stocking, not bloody stocking, muddy stockings in the thatch on his roof.
Yeah, I had to read that 4 or 5 times, but it does appear to be the case that he hid the muddy clothes, but not the bloody clothes.
Okay. Well, I'm not really surprised he didn't get away with it. But
no, I'm not getting the impression from this story that he was, really blessed with the greatest mind.
Well, even if it isn't Jane haunting Dead Woman's Ditch, I wouldn't be surprised if she was haunting the place where she was found, and I wouldn't blame her for uttering a few profanities.
Well, it's time now for our listener stories, and this first one is from Caroline.
I've had a few encounters with not so usual things. A creepy choir singing from an empty and dark church in Heslington, a ghost chicken in Maryland, USA, and experiences of entering places that felt very unwelcoming indeed. But the stories I want to share with you today come from closer to home. Literally. In 2011, my parents and I, then aged 14, moved into an old Tudor farmhouse in Wales. It's a great timber and brick building with wonky floors and a huge stone chimney. It's a bit dilapidated, but a cosy place nonetheless. But what you'll find most interesting about it is that I'm pretty certain that it's haunted. The house sits at the bottom of a hill and looks up into a forest that's named for a bloody battle that happened millennia ago. Almost immediately after we moved in, I started catching glimpses of a man standing on the hill behind the house. But it was always a glimpse. I'd see him out the corner of my eye, but when I turned my face to look, there'd be nothing but the hill behind our house and the dark forest beyond. He was a man of average height, wearing clothes that looked like they belonged to the early 1900s and a bowler hat. I never spotted him for more than a moment, and it was never full on, but he didn't seem threatening. I didn't really think anything of it until one night I was driving home to the house with my brother who lived in Brighton but who sometimes stayed with us. It was just the two of us in the car, and we started talking about the house and its long history. I mentioned seeing the man standing on the hill, and my brother started. He told me that he had seen him too. I was surprised, but passed it off as a trick of the light and shadows until last year when our landlord sent us some old photos of the house, taken around 1900. In one of them, a family stands outside the house. The father is a man of average height, wearing clothes appropriate to the period, and a bowler hat. Another occasion happened when my mother and I were home alone with our cat. That evening, my mother went upstairs to put away some laundry. The doorway of the master bedroom looks down our long upstairs corridor, so my mother had a clear view of the corridor as she hung clothes and folded. The cat was on the bed. The light in the corridor was off, but my mother didn't start when she saw somebody cross from my bedroom to the spare room directly opposite my door, because she assumed it was me, and even called for me to bring her some hangers. I appeared at the bottom of the stairs a moment later. I'd been in the living room when I heard her call, and had not been upstairs at all. The final story happened about 18 months ago, when I went into my parents' bedroom just after we'd all gone upstairs. I asked where the cat was, and then I looked down and saw the dark figure of a cat cross from their ensuite and walk past the dresser. But when I said, "Oh, never mind, there she is," I was greeted with strange looks. The cat had been sitting on my dad's lap the entire time. The real cat looked at me and flicked her tail, but if she could see the ghost cat was in the room, she didn't react. There have been other things. 1940s music in the attic that had no source. Objects disappearing and reappearing right after you ask for them back, and so on. I think my parents are going to move soon, but I wonder what the new tenants will make of the old place.
And thank you to Caroline for sharing those stories. Now, before we get into it, Lil and I both raised an eyebrow at the ghost chicken.
We need to know about the ghost chicken, Caroline.
You can't just casually mention a ghost chicken and then not follow through with the story.
Please send us the other stories, please. But there were some brilliant things in there. And one of them just at the end caught my attention. The bit about objects disappearing and reappearing right after you ask for them back, because that's something we've experienced ourselves. And oftentimes it does actually work. If things go missing and you're pretty sure it is a paranormal thing, if you ask out loud for them to be returned, quite often they actually do.
It doesn't always work.
No, it's not a fail-safe.
I recommended it to somebody that had commented on one of our YouTube videos, and they're like, "That tried it, didn't work."
No, fair enough.
Sorry, it doesn't work in every situation, but it's always worth a try.
It is. I found it quite interesting as well that you mentioned that your real cat didn't seem to react to your ghost cat. Now, we've had mixed experiences with our cats. When we lived in the very haunted house that we eventually moved out of because the experiences were getting a bit much, we actually had 6 cats at the time. So a lot of cats. And what we found is that sometimes we would see strange, dark, skittery shapes, and only one of our cats would seem to see them. One of our cats actually used to chase them. We would see something kind of skittering off down the hall that shouldn't be there, and one of our cats would chase them. Mostly the others were kind of oblivious. So I think it's like people. I think some cats can be more sensitive than others.
Yeah, it seems so.
Thank you again so much to Caroline for sharing your experiences with us. We really enjoyed reading them. And now it's time for another one. And this next story is from Matt.
My story is from 3 years ago when I was working as an electrician in Leicester. A friend of mine in the Oadby Wigston area asked me to put in a new cable for his centre island unit in the kitchen extension that had been built a few years prior. This was going to be awkward as it meant cutting under the floor in the old part of the house and knocking a gap through big enough to crawl in. I turned up on the day and he said he'd leave me to it and go to work, and that his little dog would probably follow me under the floorboards as it's a nosy little thing. I squeezed myself through the floorboards and onto my stomach, and started to crawl towards the wall. I had a plugged-in lead light and a fully charged battery-powered floodlight with me. I had to get through 2 tight bits of brickwork which were used to hold the floor up, and got to the wall I needed to break through. As there wasn't much space, I was lying on my left side, elbow on the floor holding my bolster against the wall, and started hammering. After about 5 minutes, the dog, which was laying next to me, started barking behind me and ran out from underneath. I just thought, weird. Then the lead light, which was plugged in on the floor above me, went off. I thought it was just the bulb, but then, within seconds, my torch turned off. Before I had a chance to even question what had happened, there was a hand on my ankle, and I was pulled backwards, roughly around a metre, and then let go of. Both lights flashed back on. I left the lead light, my tools, and the cable down there, and used my torch to crawl out looking directly in front of me and making sure not to look anywhere other than in front. The space was too tight, and if I started to panic, it wouldn't be good. I walked out of his house, sat in my car and rang my friend. He laughed, thinking I was joking. Then he tried to say his little dog probably pulled me. I weigh 16 stone, and his dog is like a guinea pig. I've not set foot in his house since.
Goodness me, Matt, that sounds like something straight out of a horror film. I wouldn't have set foot in that house ever again either. Never, 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 never.
But we investigate these things. Of course we'd go back and we'd bring cameras and microphones.
I would put a camera down there. I wouldn't put myself down there.
Well, I'm not sure I could fit down there, but I'm claustrophobic as well, so I would struggle to get down there, even if there weren't ghosts.
Now, as much as I say this sounds like something out of a horror film, I've just got to posit the idea, and obviously, I wasn't there, I didn't experience it, so I can't sort of do more than suggest this. Could it have been trying to save you from something dangerous? Because, of course, when the lights go off and you're pulled by the foot, immediately your mind goes to, wow, something's trying to hurt me, there's something negative. But if you're doing building work and it stopped you carrying on doing that building work, is there any chance that it could have been trying to help and stop you doing something that could have been dangerous and that you weren't aware of? Possibly.
Interesting thought.
Just, trying to do the BBC trick of presenting balanced options.
Indeed.
Nevertheless, in the moment, I would have been absolutely terrified and run for my life.
And I wouldn't blame you either. And thank you to Matt for sending in that story. But now we've got our next listener story, and this one is from Vix.
I had moved into a house with my then boyfriend, which was a small Victorian terrace in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. There was never an atmosphere, but a few weird things started to happen. The first thing that happened was when I was upstairs in my office. I heard an almighty crash from downstairs. I was terrified to even see what it was, but eventually plucked up the courage. I opened the kitchen door, and in the middle of the floor was the microwave. It was a big, old 90s microwave, and it would have needed some force to get it to the middle of the kitchen, off a worktop, and also unplugged. I have no clue how that happened. The microwave had a big dent in one corner where it had landed. I'm not sure how long afterwards the next thing happened, but I was at home in bed with a migraine when I heard someone laugh in the corner of my bedroom. I was alone in the house. I can't describe the laugh too well, but it wasn't malicious. It was just how you might act if you see someone snuggled in bed, like, oh. I didn't feel threatened. The next memorable event was when my boyfriend and I returned from holiday. We'd just walked up the stairs and the smoke alarm randomly went off. Not a low battery noise, but a full-on alert. And as far as we were aware, there was nothing to set this off. Now, I know they can be a bit random, but this links to the next event. A few weeks later, my boyfriend and I were sitting in the living room when it started to fill with smoke. I panicked and opened the doors, but there was no sign of a fire and it just dispersed. We both witnessed this, and there was no smell, just smoke. As I said, I never felt threatened, and the instances were fairly well spaced to avoid us really thinking much of them. I nicknamed the entity Bob and spoke to him sometimes. The reason I feel they were linked and paranormal is due to what a neighbour said. We had to sell the house due to a relationship breakdown, and I was chatting to my neighbour one evening after she'd seen the for sale board, and she asked if we were leaving due to the ghost. Apparently, the prior residents had also had experiences there, including hearing breathing and laughing in the bedroom. I wonder if the next people did too.
And thank you to Vix for sharing that story. That very last bit at the end, I love that. It's a proper, wait, what moment?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're selling up. Oh, is it because of the ghost? No, it's because of the, wait, what?
Yeah. I love that. The other thing that stood out to me was the living room filling with smoke, but with no smell.
Yeah, everyone knows that smoke stinks. It gets in your clothes.
I mean,
it gets
you
everywhere.
smell it before you see
Oh,
it.
yeah.
You really do. And how weird that the smoke alarm had gone off inexplicably just a short time before.
That's weird. I wonder if the house burned down previously.
I don't know.
Or maybe it will in future and it's just echoing.
Possibly. Well, the only instance I can think of is with ghost smoke is an experience that I had in our old house. Now, it wasn't anything anywhere near as dramatic as the living room filling with smoke, but it was quite strange. I was in our living room in the haunted house on my own. There was nobody else around. And I saw this just very clear wisp of smoke. Just in the middle of the living room, it just appeared in front of me and it hung there and then it was gone. And it was very strange, like I say, not as dramatic at all, but it just appeared out of nowhere. There were no windows open, there was no person around, nowhere for it to come from. It just appeared. And now I'm thinking about it, it didn't smell either. You know, there was no smoke smell accompanying it. which I'd not actually thought of before. So that's very interesting.
Oh, I do remember you telling me about that now that you mention it, but I wasn't there at the time, so I didn't witness it for myself.
You were not. Well, thank you again so much to Vix for sharing those experiences with us. And that brings us to our last listener story of the episode, and this one is from Lenny.
I was raised in a rural area about 20 minutes from Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire, almost halfway between Huntingdon and Peterborough. The village I grew up in was very quiet, with one pub and one shop, and at least 3/4 of a mile from the nearest town. One summer night, I was walking home from the town back into the village, and it was dark, but warm and close. On the opposite side of the road from me, a bit further up, was a garage which also had a small car dealership attached, so there were cars parked out the front. As I got closer, I became aware of someone near the petrol pumps, a lady wearing what appeared to be a long black dress, black coat, white shirt with a collar that seemed to go up around the neck, and dark hair. I decided as I was going to be going past, I wouldn't make eye contact as I didn't want a lady stood on her own to feel uncomfortable. As I got past her, however, something told me to look back. I did, but she was gone. As it's a rural area at that time of night, there was no traffic. If she'd run in either direction, I would have heard her. I tried to see between the cars of the forecourt. She wasn't there. I decided to carry on home, and it wasn't until I was safely tucked up in bed it dawned on me that I may have seen something odd. I decided to tell my mum and dad, who I lived with at the time, but no one else. Some years later, now married and moved into my own house, my mum called me one night to ask me what I'd seen. I gave her the details, and she went quiet. She said, "I'm going to send you a picture now. Your dad found this in a load of old photos of the area." A few minutes passed and an email appeared. The image showed the garage how it looked a long time before, and sure enough, stood to the side of the pumps was a lady dressed in black with a white shirt on. The hairs stood up on my arms. I still have a glance when I go past to this day.
It's just so amazing to me when you get that photo confirmation of something you've seen. And that's the second story this episode.
It is.
Where a witness has had photographic confirmation of basically what they've seen.
Yep, it's a proper dun 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 moment. It's like, was it this? Yes.
Even reading it out loud, the hairs just stand up on your arms.
Yep, I absolutely love stories like that. That sort of, they have this little nugget that comes later that just backs it up and gives you a second chill. It's fantastic.
It reminds me a little bit of an experience that you had when we were driving back to the house before this one. It was quite late at night, and I remember you telling me about it later, that you passed two people standing on the corner of the road, and it was only because it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, some stupid o'clock, that after you'd driven past, you suddenly thought, what on earth were those people just doing standing there on the corner of the road?
I think it was like an adult and a child. I think it stood out because it was like a parent walking a child or
somebody
something.
you wouldn't expect to be out at 3
Not at 3 in the morning. Like, you know, there's people walking home from the pub or people that work nights and stuff that do stuff fine. Yeah, they're out at the early hours of the morning. I was out at the early hours of the morning. That's not unusual. But it was the fact that there was a child with them that spooked me, I think. And because it had spooked me, I looked back in the mirror after I'd passed them, and they were gone. And there was nowhere they could, like this story, there was nowhere they could have gone. It was flat ground. There was nothing around. Like, they'd have had to have dug a hole and jump in it in like 3 or 4 seconds.
And also, to be honest, at that time of the morning, and you were driving through a very, very quiet, small little village, you would have heard them as well, because you know what sounds are like at 3 a.m.
I don't know if I would in the car with the engine noise. I'm not sure I'd have heard anything. But, you know, yeah, they would have had to have done something pretty special to have hid themselves.
Well, thank you so much to Lenny for sharing that experience with us. And thank you to all of our listeners who shared a story in today's episode. Your true paranormal stories are the heart and soul and backbone of the show. So if you have a story you'd like to share with us, please do get in touch through the website at knockOnceVS.com. But fear not, that's not the end of the episode. We have a bit more spooky goodness for you yet. Now, one of the best things about doing this podcast has been getting to meet new people in the paranormal world and make new friends. And we love nothing better than sitting down for a good old chinwag about all things spooky. So we were absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to do just that with longtime paranormal investigator and editor of Haunted magazine, Paul Stevenson.
And we're excited to bring you that interview now.
We are so thrilled to welcome to the show today Paul Stevenson, founder and editor of Haunted magazine and a paranormal investigator with the Haunted Live team, who not only do their own investigations, but also live stream them, as well as hosting public events and investigations. Paul, you are a very busy man. Welcome to the show.
Hello. It does sound like that, but it's just, when you think about what we do, actually, it is good, but it's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me. Hope you're well, both well.
We are. Thank you very much. So we are massive fans of Haunted magazine. We first came across you actually at a Paraforce paranormal convention. This was down in Cressing Temple Barns in Essex, way back in 2017. And we picked up a couple of issues of Haunted magazine while we were there. And I was really, really thrilled to discover it because I love magazines, like a lot of people. A glossy magazine is a real treat, and we really don't have that many paranormal magazines in the UK. I mean, we've got 14 Times, and that's kind of it. So to discover Haunted magazine was so brilliant because I felt like it was more a magazine by paranormal investigators for paranormal investigators and enthusiasts, not just investigators. But it was more, I felt it was more reflective of kind of my paranormal world that I experienced. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. You know what? 2017 seems like an age ago, a different world ago.
Oh, it does.
But you're right. And I think that's what I wanted to do with the magazine. We wanted to, I love 14 Times. I subscribed to 14 Times, but we set out not to be 14 Times. You cannot be 14 Times too. There's no point. We wanted to do, as you said, a magazine about ghost hunting for ghost hunters, simple, and to welcome people into the sector, into the niche, into the industry, who might not want to get bamboozled by science sometimes, and want to present all these articles, all these features, and package it into a glossy magazine that is appealing and can draw you in. The cover is the first page of anything, a book, a magazine, or anything like that. So if you can draw people in and you can make features that may not be read otherwise by either a cheesy tagline or a title that can draw people in, it works for us. And of course, anyone loves a glossy magazine, the smell of it when it comes and, flicking through the pages. I've always said I don't want to go home after working on a laptop for 5 hours and flick through another laptop to read a magazine. I would rather have something in print that I can just flick through, put it down and pick it up again a couple of hours later if that's the case.
Oh, you're so right. There is something just special about finishing the workday and just settling yourself down into the sofa with comfy cushions and a hot drink and a proper magazine. And the smell, when you mention the smell, it's so evocative. Everybody knows the smell of a brand new glossy magazine. It's just wonderful.
You're right. You're not wrong there.
So for anyone who hasn't heard of Haunted magazine before, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of things you might find in an issue, what sort of articles you have, who writes for you, what kind of people you interview, that kind of thing?
Well, the magazine basically is, we always say it's a theme park of the paranormal. It's a roller coaster ride of different features. There's no set style. We have mediums, we have skeptics writing for us, we have diehard believers, we have parapsychologists writing for us. Anybody and everybody, even first-time writers, have written for us. I'm a big believer of people telling their story and people telling ghost stories on historic locations. We don't really have a set. Yeah, we have a cover and we put on the cover who's in the magazine, part of it, and there's a contents page. But when we set out every issue, we have a blank canvas. We don't say this has to be in, this has to be in, this can't go in. Nothing's off limits, even controversial stuff. If people want to say something, and it's something that we think should go in, then it probably does go in. I get asked quite a few times, "Oh, Paul, what can we write for you?" I say, "Well, I'm the editor, but I would rather you tell me what you want to write rather than me suggest something, because if I suggest something, then to me that it's not you having a passion for something that you want, a subject you want to write about. I'm telling you to go off and write it or research it, but I'd rather you come to me and say, Paul, I've got this feature on this, that, and the other. I've researched it. I'm really passionate about it." I said, "Yeah, send it in, and we'll see if it fits."
That's brilliant. I love that. A theme park of the paranormal. That sums it up so brilliantly. And this is why it's more sort of, I feel like it's a paranormal magazine for the paranormal community, because the paranormal community is massively varied. It's a kaleidoscope. There are so many facets to it. And I feel that that's often what's missing a lot from sort of paranormal TV and other forms of media like that. It doesn't reflect the broad spectrum of the paranormal community, which is why it's so great that you have so many different writers and so many different types of articles, because I think it reflects that a lot better.
Well, I think paranormal TV is one facet of the paranormal. It's a branch. It's a strand off it. It's people some people love it, and some people watch shows and everything, and that's what they want to do. I'm a big believer of respecting people's opinions, discuss, debate, disagree, but respect people's beliefs and respect people's what they're into and what they're not into. But as you mentioned, there's so many rabbit holes and so many warrens to go down and so many paths to follow in the paranormal. We've always said that we'll never run out of ideas or articles or features to fit in the magazine, because you've got a catalogue of back history of so many hundreds and thousands. It's just amazing. It's just the people that we call we are Team Haunted. That's our sort of like hashtag, Team Haunted. And we always say that the work that the writers send and anybody sends into us, we need to do those words justice. And that's why we believe in, quality design and quality features with a glossy cover, with a design that's as you said, suits the paranormal community. We want people to fall in love with the paranormal, even if they don't maybe not agree with everything that's involved in the paranormal. And myself and Andy, the designer, we set out to do a magazine that we would buy in the shops if we saw it in the shops, if that makes sense.
It does.
That's kind of what we did with this show.
Yeah.
We made the show that we wanted to listen to. And that kind of takes us on to our next question, actually. We talked a little bit about what goes into the magazine and why you've made that decision, but what was the inspiration for starting the magazine in the first place? And how did you obtain your vision of what you wanted it to be?
Great question, to be fair. I've always had a love for the paranormal. As a kid, I grew up reading the Osborne books, all about ghosts, all about
the Osborne Book of Ghosts,
all about monsters,
we love it.
The supernatural world, and I got hooked. I was a kid with a very overactive imagination, and these books explained the paranormal in a way that made sense for a kid, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
It does.
And my granddad had just died in the late 70s, and it kind of made sense. It would kind of, it's like a comfort blanket kind of thing to realize that his granddad's gone, but he's not gone. So,
absolutely.
And everything. So that's why I've always had a passion for the paranormal. I've always loved writing, be it poetry, comedy, sketches, jokes, as you know. And I think in the early 2000s, I had this idea to do a paranormal magazine, and I was checking some old paperwork a few months back, and I actually found the domain name. I bought hauntermagazine.co.uk. I bought it in 2006.
Oh, wow.
So, and I bought it, and it took 3 years to get the philosophy of the magazine out in the way I wanted it to be. I mean, and I think it came about because most authors is the paranormal Marmite. You either love it.
Yes, it is.
It. In 2001 or 2, when it first came out, it was brilliant.
And it's all we had as well.
Lots of us watched it. A lot of people are into the paranormal because of it now. and it was entertainment. It was great. And I think at the time, there was not a magazine that focused on the entertainment side of the paranormal and packaged it in a way that could be, I've always seen 14 Times as an academia kind of magazine, a magazine for people who are more, I guess, believe more, if that makes sense. And I thought, well, let's give it a go. And 2009, the first magazine came out. And I'll be honest, it probably was ahead of its time in terms of the cheekiness of it and everything. The paranormal is massive now, but in 2009, it didn't seem that big. And then I think, luckily, social media imploded and exploded.
Yeah.
And I think Facebook and Twitter helped the magazine grow as a cult magazine. And we've just learned from that. We've learned, and everything. And then 2011, we went digital because technology had advanced so much that we were available to be a digital version because printing just costs so much money. And then sadly, we couldn't afford to do print anymore. But then 2017, 16, go full circle, and we're now doing print and digital. So it's been a journey for the magazine, but a journey that I'm very proud of, and of everybody involved and the support we get for it. But it's been one hell of a journey, that's for sure.
I bet. And I'm so glad it's back in print again, because I love digital, and I have got some of your digital copies as well. It definitely has its place, but there's nothing to beat a print copy.
I think you're right. I think because 2011, 12, the printing cost just shot up so much. And we thought, look, as much as we love the paranormal, we can't lose money. It's, we can't lose a lot of money because it's just ridiculous. So rather than just lose the brand altogether, we thought, Andy came up and said, well, why don't we do digital? Why don't we, go on the iPhones and go on the Android phones? So rather than just dismiss it and then maybe pick it up years later, we kept the brand going with digital versions, started again, did digital issue 0 and carried on from there. And then when cost came down and everything, and people said, oh, you know what, I really would have loved this to be in print. We did cost exercises to see if it was viable to do so. Did a small print run in 2016. That went very good, very well. And, we printed 500 copies in 2016, the first issue back in print, and we're printing near 4,000 copies now. So it just shows how the magazine has grown, the audience has grown, and it shows that we always say we want to better each issue. We always strive to do something different. And we love the people who love Haunter Magazine, and there's an audience there. And whenever there's an audience there, we'll always be around.
Oh, I hope you will be. So we've kind of touched a little bit on your, what we call your origin stories, or how you got started in the paranormal, what inspired you. So you've already told us a little bit about your childhood interest in the paranormal and the Usborne Book of Ghosts, which, we're massive fans as well. We were so excited when that was republished. But how did you take that childhood interest and then end up becoming a paranormal investigator? Did you have an experience that sort of cemented that? Or did you decide to just further it and go out and start doing sort of public investigations? Or how did that come about?
I think, personally, I just bumbled and fumbled into it, if I'm honest. As I said, I've always loved ghost stories, always loved it. And then I remember years back, I worked in a call centre at night. I was a night shift in this old spooky building, an old mill from the 1700s. 1800s and such forth. And I worked there nights on my own. And it wasn't very busy at night. So I read more. I started with the magazine, doing stuff about it. But it was just the atmosphere of being in that haunted building, being in a building. And ironically, most haunted did come to that building. 2005 or 6 or 7. It was called Pleasure Mills up in Pleasantvale near Mansfield. And they came to an episode there. I don't know what year. And I remember just falling in love, with the history of the building. And it's an old mill, and children work there, pretty harsh conditions. The rumours of children being killed during the machinery, when the machinery broke down or whatever, and they were just buried in the water. So it's just a sad story. And I remember once, I think I nodded off during my night shift. And I remember once. Listen, the phone calls there was only about 1 or 2 phone calls an hour, emergency phone calls. So there were lots of spare time. So for my sins, I think I nodded off. I'm sure I did. And I remember waking up, and I remember for one split second, I woke up and I had this vision of about 50 kids, black-eyed kids, just looking at me. Oh. And I don't know whether it was a dream. I don't know whether it was my imagination or whether I was coming out of a dream or not. But I remember it's clear as anything in my head. That's what I saw. And then obviously I carried on with my job, but it's still in my head. I can still see these kids dressed, miserable looking kids, no smiles, black eyes, flat caps, old clothes. And I'm thinking, wow, and I think it's things like that in your memory bank from whether you were a kid or whether you were an adult or anything that interests you and definitely piqued my interest. But in terms of investigating, I think I've just fumbled and stumbled into it. Because of the magazine, it opened doors for locations for us to go in and look at. And I just think it was in the 2009-10. I went on a few ghost hunts back in the late 1990s and early 2000s with, I think, Fright Nights with one of the original companies. And I just thought, with myself, with Haunted Live and the guys and the magazine going out to places like Bosworth Hall and stuff, I think it just kind of fell into it. I think it just felt natural to do that with your friends. We didn't want to set up a team and invite people to join who we didn't know. I think the best for me to ghost hunt with your mates, that's just the biggest buzz ever.
Yeah. Have you ever been back? Have you investigated
the workplace?
Well, I worked there for many years, and there's been a couple of experiences because, as I said, there was nobody there at night. This company was the only company that had a night shift, and I was there from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. on my own, and it wasn't very busy. I can remember thinking about it, going to the toilet, a separate building, and it's about a 2-minute walk, and I can remember walking there fine, and I can remember walking back, and I can remember the door to another unit, another company, was slightly ajar when I walked there. And I thought, fair enough, he just left it open and nobody comes at night. And that's fair enough. And then when I walked back, it was banging. I'm thinking, geez, what's going on here? The door was banging and it was a windy night. So, but it's just the place, honestly, the place is, I can't remember what most haunted picked up, whether they picked up anything good or bad or different. I did research the history of the place, and there are ghost stories about a security guard who people have seen and they chatted to, and then people have said, oh yeah, I was chatting to the security guard, and there's no security guard on today. So there is many ghost stories about Plesley. If people search up Plesley Vale Mills, it's an old cotton mill that was quite harsh to their kids who worked there. I think it got taken over by somebody, and it got made better in terms of industrial working. Things like they built a school, a church for their families and everything. But I think prior to that, it was a pretty nasty place to work in.
That sounds amazing. I mean, well, I say it sounds amazing. It's easy for me to sit here in my nice, warm, brightly sunlit house and say that sounds amazing. I can't imagine it was quite so amazing to have to work there the night shift with it. It was obviously quite a spooky building.
It was. I mean, the thing is that there was a company called Rupert Mole Events many years ago who did run events there.
I think that cotton mill has kind of made it onto our bucket list to investigate, because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, as are many locations all over.
Well, I mean, the locations that you can investigate in are obviously increasing all the time. So there's nothing to say that it won't pop back up on public events locations at some point in the future. It's worth keeping an eye out.
I say, when the magazine first came out, there wasn't that many locations to be investigated. We've always championed for the buildings opening their doors for ghost hunts. And I know a lot of paranormal teams got miffed off the fact that events companies were hosting events there. The prices went up for the building to charge, and it put a lot of paranormal teams said they couldn't afford to go in because the prices had gone up. But I've always been a big champion of these historic places we've got in our country, opening their doors to the public, to ghost hunt, basically. A lot of locations, are 9 to 5, and from 5 p.m. till the following morning, they're static. And if locations can make a bit of money and they can get people, investigators, ghost hunters in to enjoy the evening, I think it's a win-win situation for companies, is buildings and the public as well.
No, I think you're completely right. We've often said that I think one thing that sometimes people forget is that these buildings, a lot of them are historic locations and they're massively underfunded. Mm-hmm. They have to get their funding and the upkeep of these buildings is tremendous, where you've got listed buildings. Any upkeep is incredibly expensive. And actually having public ghost hunts is a really good way of raising money for the upkeep of those buildings. So these public ghost hunts can actually mean that we get to enjoy these historic buildings as either tourists or investigators for years to come, because we're putting money back into the maintenance of them. And also, I think, you're right. Everybody has the right to experience investigating and have the experience of going on these into these buildings, these historic locations, and having an experience. And it shouldn't just be for the few that can manage to have a paranormal team and pay for insurance and things like that. It's important that it's available and accessible to everybody.
Totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. And, that's £25, £30, £40 to pay for a ghost hunt per person. It's a wonderful opportunity to, I had the pleasure of visiting some fantastic locations that I might never have visited or might never have got into. And to see, New Abbey is one of them. I don't think New Abbey do many ghost hunts now, but a few years ago they did them every 2 or 3 months. And this place is, and again, it's on my doorstep, and it's this place is amazing. The Byron family and everything. We all know about Lord Byron and everything, and it just to walk in the footsteps of these legendary people from the past, and to investigate the paranormal, whether it's there or not, it's just amazing. And to see the grandeur of the building, and to see the walls, and to see the grounds, and to hear about the history of the place. It's just, you can never have enough history. I'm a big lover of history, and these places, these buildings, as you said, they are seriously underfunded, and every little penny helps, I guess.
Yeah. So you've been investigating for how many years now?
Crikey me. I think I went into one late 1990s, but I think I went to Tutbury Castle with a company that might have been Fright Nights or something like that. I think it was a birthday present. But I've always had a fascination for the paranormal. But I think that was my first proper paid event I went for. And the Haunted Live had been around for 9-10 years probably. But I think I've probably been investigating probably since about, I would say 2010-11, when the magazine first got a following. We'd go to locations and we'd have a look around, and would have do a mini investigations. And then obviously that when Facebook started streaming lives, whatever year that was, we did live streams, and then we started running events. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Well, we haven't been investigating anywhere near as long as you, but even in the time we have been investigating, one of the things that continually sort of blows my mind is that we kind of went into this field having had plenty of paranormal experiences ourselves. Actually, we've had paranormal experiences since we were children. So we kind of went into doing the podcast and being more involved in the paranormal world, thinking we knew a thing or two about the paranormal. We had some sort of understandings, or so we thought. But one of the things I love so much about this field is the more you investigate, the more what you think you understand about the paranormal is just completely turned upside down. And it can just be one investigation where something happens. It completely flips everything you thought you understood about paranormal upside down. And we just find this happens quite continuously. Have there been any investigations like that for you where
100% absolutely agree with you on that?
Yeah.
I totally agree. You know what you know, and what you don't know, you hope to know at some point.
Yes.
I got, I think a few years back, I said, I think I was on a podcast very similar to this, and they called me, welcome to Paranormal Expert. I said, whoa, I am not an expert. Please don't, I do not want to be labeled an expert. I know what I know, and what I don't know. That's, I understand why people are called experts, but I ain't one of them, believe you me. But you're right about wanting to learn more. And I think I actually touched on it in my editorial column in the next issue of Haunted Mag about.
Oh yeah,
you get to a point where you know something, and then something will say something, and it questions what you were thinking before, and you come to a crossroads in the paranormal, and you think, "Wow, yeah, I thought this, but now I'm thinking something else." And I totally get what you're saying, because recently, I don't know if you've listened to Danny Robbins' Uncanny over the last few months and everything.
Oh yes.
Now, it's a great show. You know, we've met and we love Danny. Danny's a wonderful person and everything. And what somebody said on one of those shows, I think it was Kieran who said something on one of those shows or in a tweet about the show. He said a lot of the people on Danny's show weren't out investigating, weren't out ghost hunting.
No.
They were just doing their everyday life, doing their everyday jobs, and something happened, you know, and it got me thinking that, we go out to ghost hunt and we go out to investigate the paranormal, but, you know, what if something's going to happen, it doesn't have to happen on when you want it to happen or when you think you want it to happen.
It's not going to wait for a paranormal investigator to rock up.
No, it's not even going to wait for someone that believes in it.
No.
The amount of stories we have where it's like, I don't believe in all that nonsense, but and we get a corker of a story out of it. It's fantastic.
Well, you know what? I was thinking about this, and when we first started doing events back in the, about 8-9 years ago, a lot of people, a lot of men were just chauffeurs. A lot of women went to ghost hunts, not many men. The men were just dragged along as chauffeurs or as a plus one. And I see now on ghost events, a lot of men ghost hunting because they're interested. It probably was 70, 80, 20 or even higher than that with female to male. It's probably 50-50 now on the events.
Oh, wow.
It's not just, it's increased. The men, I remember speaking to somebody at a location before, and said, I've just come because, my wife can't get here. So I've just come because I'm a plus one and she can't get here. So, and then they get interested in it and they get sucked into it and they become, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I don't believe. And then they, wow, what happened there? So,
and then something will happen. Yes, exactly. So with that in mind, have there been any particular locations where you've had one of these sort of breakthrough moments where it's flipped everything on its head? Or have there been any locations that have really got under your skin? I know we've come across, and we've had this experience ourselves, where paranormal investigators have gone to one specific location and that location has really got under their skin, really wormed their way into the consciousness. They can't stop thinking about it. They have to go back over and over again. They just can't get it out of their heads. They kind of get sucked into the rabbit hole of that location's history. Have you had that with anyone?
Yeah, I would say there's three really. East Drive is one of them. 30 East.
So that's 30 East Drive for the listeners. Yeah,
we went there quite early doors, not long after Bill Bungay had bought the place. We spent 5 nights there, concurrent 5 nights on the trot, and it was weird. It was amazing. It was every night was different. One night was quiet. One night was off the scale. It felt like when we were downstairs, there were noises upstairs. When we went upstairs chasing it, it was noises downstairs. One night was quite nasty. One night was quite emotional.
Oh, why?
So it was just like every night. We all know every night's different. You never get 2 nights the same. Never ever. You can't recreate what happened in the past and everything. But yeah, East Drive is one of those that didn't get under my skin. It baffled me as to why, what happened. It felt like there was more there. We had a medium with us who and I'm not a medium myself, and I wish I could see what a medium could see, because we had like little girls who were frightened to come and talk. So the medium said, because there was a nasty man saying that they couldn't talk, and it gets you. I so wish we were. That was 30 East Drive. The other location is Haunted Antiques Research Centre.
The Haunted Antique Centre. Yes,
it's like that place is amazing. I don't know if your listeners have been or not. I know you guys have been, but it's an amazing place where it's full of antiques, and this is what differentiates and the HAPRC from a museum. Neil, the owner, bless him, does not say, "Oh yeah, these antiques are definitely haunted." It's a research centre for us guys as ghost hunters, as investigators, as researchers to see if there are any paranormal activity there, and that's what I love about the place, because the antiques that they've got are just amazing places. The rooms are amazing. How he's constructed it is amazing. And the experiences we've had there, we've had a heavy table move. We were with Barry Guy. Barry's a paranormal investigator. And we were in this seance room. We were filming at the time. It was a live stream. And I was filming, and the other guys were sat around the table. All the hands were above. And said, if there's anybody there, please move this table. And now you have to be there. But this table was heavy. It was really, really heavy. A circular table. And it moved, and it's caught on camera, and it's like, wow.
I remember that, and I remember that table because we've been up there, and it's not something that's going to slide about by itself.
It's like, and every time I think about it, my brain tries to work out things a lot, as I guess most people do, but I cannot explain how they moved. And people say, yeah, one of you guys kicked it and everything, but we didn't, I trust the Haunted Live. I trust Barry. We wouldn't move it. I don't see the point. I don't see the point of faking things. I just do not see that there's enough mystery and enough mysticalness in the paranormal not to have to do that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So this table moved, and it's like, it's just amazing. And people say, "Oh, why didn't you have a camera under the table?" Well, we didn't have a camera because we didn't know we were going to move.
Why would you think to put a camera under the table?
You can't win, can you? Sometimes. You have to be there. A lot of activity that you see for yourself, if other people don't see it, I kind of get the feeling why they can be say, yeah. But I believe the paranormal is a personal journey. We're all at different levels of this journey. That table moved, and it blows me out of the water, to be fair, that footage. And to have Barry there as well, it wasn't just our team, it was to have Barry there with us, and he was blown away by it as well. It just kind of made the night a bit more special.
Mm.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day. It kind of depends on what you're trying to prove, and
or
if you're trying
to prove anything.
Like, we tend to approach this from more of a sort of entertainment perspective.
Well,
so
it's not necessarily entertainment. I would say like an experiential perspective. When we investigate the paranormal, we want to make a connection. We want to communicate. We want to have an experience. Yeah, but we're not trying to prove anything to anyone.
I agree totally. I got asked this question the other night, last night actually. Somebody said, why do you do what you do? And I said, well, I do it for the vibe, for the crack, for the buzz, for being with my mates. I joked about it. I've got two teenage daughters, so I go out for a rest. Believe you me, I just I love ghost hunting. I love paranormal investigating. However you want to term it, however you want to call it. I love it with mates I can trust, mates I can have a laugh with, mates I can have some banter with. I don't want to prove. I don't want to disprove. I just want to go out, visit these grand locations and great locations. I class ghosting as a hobby. I love it. I'm not a professional. I just enjoy ghost hunting. I enjoy visiting locations. I enjoy using gadgets, not using gadgets. I'm not fussed as to, I've got no set formula or pattern of doing what I do. And that's me. And we're all different. People will have a set criteria of they've got to be the EV, the REM pod has to be there. You have to have a temperature thing. I'm not for any of that. I believe in just going, and then what happens. If the paranormal and the spooks and spirits are there watching us and acting on what we suggest, then you can't have a script. You cannot have a formula, a plan. Just go and see what happens. That's my method, really.
And you've sort of covered about 3 different things we wanted to ask you on there. There was one point I just wanted to bring up, like going back to what we were saying a minute ago, is the specific example you said about why didn't you have a camera under the table? It's like, well, if we'd have known the table was going to move, we might have done. But
how can you know?
You don't know what's going to happen, and you can't.
Well, Haunted Live is basically 4 guys, 1 camera. That's the thing. 4 guys, 1 camera. And whatever happens. That's the beauty of it. And it's not very often you get footage where there are 2 cameras, 2 angles, 3 angles, or whatever.
No,
but to capture the table moving is just bizarre. And I've got it in my Dropbox, and I've got the clip of it in my Dropbox, and I play it every now and then. And I'm thinking, it's when I play it, even though I'm not there, even though it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I still get goosebumps watching it. I still get that, I still get the feeling of how good it was and everything. And it's just that will never ever be explained. It will just it's on camera. It will never be explained, and that's what I love about it. Nobody's going to say, yeah, it was cost whatever, or a lorry going past, or it was not. The table moved. I swear, on my life, that table moved, and the guys with me saw it move, and it's just a piece of footage that will never. It'll always be on my memory, and in my Dropbox and everything. And I'll send you the clip. I'm sure you've seen it. I think you've said you've seen it.
I have, but I mean, do send it to us again. I'd love to rewatch it.
It's an amazing piece of footage, but footage is footage. Footage is something that it's like the ghost pictures of old and that kind of thing, and the footage from the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. We are blessed with technology. I'm sure Harry Price and Guy Lyon Playfair and such forth would have loved the technology that we've got now.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I'm sure they would.
So we were going to ask you about what sort of equipment that you would use on the investigation, but it sounds like you're very much like eyes and a camera, like people, like literally living through it, documenting it with a camera, but you're not a great fan.
The beauty of Haunted Live is we take it in turns on the streams. We take it in turns to film, so we all get an experience. We just hand over, and whatever gadgets the guys bring, the guys know me that I don't possess any. I don't own any gadgets. I don't. My gadgets are my eyes and my ears and my legs. If I want to run away, that's why I trust my gadgets. People that know me know that I'm not a gadget person. I will use the gadgets that people have brought. Happily use them. Happily get involved in thing, but I don't possess any gadgets myself. But I will do back to basics, or whatever they call it, ghost hunting. Sit in a room and try and sense, or try and hopefully something will happen. Or I will sit there with a digital recorder, or I'll sit there and do whatever. But yeah, I don't possess any gadgets myself, and which you might think is weird for a ghost hunter. But
no, not really. We don't. We do have some gadgets, but
that's just the way I am. And people think, oh yeah. When people say to me, "What's this? What's this REM pod do?" I'm like, I pass you over to Jason. Jason knows what REM pod does. But joking about, the REM pod, I love the REM pod. It's very rare we actually get to hear it go off. But when it goes off and there's nobody in the room, you're thinking, what the hell's made that go off? You know what I mean? And it's like, and the flashy, I think cat balls, the flashy balls, they're quite popular.
Yeah, that's what we have. Yeah,
the flashy cat balls, and it's like, you know what? I understand the principle for cats, a toy for cats, but when you put them on a table and you're all in the room and they don't go off, and then you walk away and they leave the cat ball in the room, and it goes off, what how has it gone off?
Yeah,
we actually...
So we had exactly this at Haunted Antiques.
Yeah.
There was one item that it just kept triggering for, and we couldn't get it to do it for anything else.
No, we almost were having a conversation with the item through the cat ball responding.
It felt like it was responding to our questions. It was insane. And going back to locations, because there were going to be people out there like me that said he said 3 locations and he's only given us 2.
Yes, what was the third?
What's your last one?
Well done, you're good at maths there. East Drive,
I can count to 3.
HTPRC, and the one not far from me in Clay is Bosworth Hall.
Ah, okay.
An amazing place that we've had the privilege to ghost hunt and run events there for a good 4 or 5 years now. Not many, because it's a hotel. It's a wedding conference venue, so they don't do every week, and that's what I love about it, because it's 2 or 3 or 4 times a year tops. That's what about it. And the thing is, what I also love about it, it's a living, breathing, working hotel. So you've got us walking around rooms with guests and ourselves, rooms that are obviously the public aren't in because there's a hotel bar and everything. But 100 meters away, you've got a vibrant, buzzing hotel, and that's what. Not many locations are actually open at the time you investigate. And what I love about Bosworth Hall is the history of Bosworth Hall is amazing. But what I love about it is that it's a hotel, but it's not been travel-lodged or Premier-inned. The staircase is still there. The ornate statues are still there. The paintings from 200, 300 years are still there. The rooms are dedicated, named after the people who live there. And worked there. It was an old hospital during the war and pre-war. It's a manor house back in the day. It's got so much history, rich history and mystery. And of course, they've got their own ghost story as well, the Grey Lady. It's just an amazing place. I don't know if you guys have been or not, but it's an amazing place. And every time we go, it feels like there's something there, and we went there for a recce 2017, and they've not had a ghost hunt there, never had a ghost hunt there, but they'd obviously had the legend of the Grey Lady, that kind of thing. So we went there, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt like we were opening something, if that makes sense. And every time we go, every time we've been, and of course during the pandemic we couldn't go for 18 months, so we had our last event last Halloween, and it was A, refreshing to get back, B, great to be able to see people again. But it felt like there was so much activity that it felt like they'd been missing us. Does that make sense? Or not? They knew who we were because we've been there previously, but where have you been? That kind of thing. It was like, and the guests, the event side of Haunted Live and Haunted Magazine, the guests are amazing, and the guests are so into it. And now, and I imagine events in the past where an event company team would bring an array of gadgets, an array of this, that, and the other, and try and go through one by one what this gadget does and that gadget does. Guests now are that intuitive. They bring their own gadgets, they bring their own cameras, they bring their own recorders. So it's easy. It's really easy to run an event. And I don't mean that disrespectful to any events companies, but, you're not having to explain. And there are first timers who come to events, and you do your best to encourage them. And because we always say, don't be, if you see something or hear something or want to say something, no matter how silly it sounds, please do say it, because it would hate to be, I'd hate to think after the event, I heard something. Well, why didn't you say anything? Because somebody else might have heard it, so, but no, it's that place, Bosworth Hall, is amazing.
That's really interesting what you just said, actually, about speaking up when you have an experience. And I say this because over this weekend, we were watching Phenomenacon. It's like an online paranormal convention run by the Travelling Paranormal Museum, Greg and Dana Newkirk. And there was a really good talk by one of the speakers about investigating and sort of using your intuition. And the speaker was talking about how important it is when you have experiences or sort of intuitive thoughts or just things pop into your head, things occur to you during an investigation, that it's so important to speak them out loud, tell somebody, write them down, record them, because it might not make sense at the time, and often it doesn't. But the number of times they've gone away and then researched into the history or talked to other people and found out that these seemingly nonsensical things they came up with are actually really relevant or really important, and they do make sense after the fact. So I think what you're saying is that you encourage your guests to, even if they feel a bit uncomfortable and maybe a bit silly saying these things, it's definitely important to share that with somebody.
Yeah, there's been a couple of times we've heard stories from people, and they were just, I think it was Haunted Heritage we were speaking to.
Yeah.
And they were saying that one of their guests was like, the reenactors there were really good. Like, we don't have reenactors. And if they'd have said something at the time, you could have taken a photo or perhaps tried to investigate it, but they didn't even think to say anything, because they just, if you see someone in period dress at a haunted location, a lot of people are just going to assume that it's a reenactor, aren't they? Because the amount of times we see stuff and it just looks like a person, you wouldn't know.
Well, also, Fitz and I had an experience that was quite relevant to this topic when we were investigating County Hall in Northampton. And we both separately had the image of a person standing at the window looking out. We didn't realise that we'd had the exact same image pop into our heads. And it literally was, I'm not talking about anything, we're not mediums, it wasn't weird or ethereal or anything like that. It was literally just quick image popped into our head of a chap standing at the window looking out. But if we hadn't shared that information, and if we hadn't been encouraged to share that information, we would never have known that we saw exactly the same thing, which is
you're right.
really bizarre.
Mentioning Bosworth Hall, obviously it's a living, breathing, working hotel. And when we speak to the marketing team about hosting our next event, they always say, we've had 3 guests who wanted to move rooms because they felt strange in the room. We had one story that they told us about a new person started as a night porter. On his first shift, he opened the door and saw a grey lady standing there. He was never seen again. He didn't turn up for his second night. So it just shows you that what I mentioned before about uncanny. Wow. It's not just a ghost hunt where you experience paranormal activity. It happens all the time. And this is the beauty of, imagine checking into a hotel thinking, I'm here for a nice weekend, and then having to move rooms because something's happening in the room, or someone's knocking, or they've seen something, and the night porter got a new job, brand new job, and then never seen again after his first night. So
bless him.
It's just the beauty of the paranormal. It's just, and I'm fascinated by, people's experiences, fascinated by them. I never say to anybody, I can't be right, because it's their story, it's their journey, and people put pictures on Facebook and social media, and and they get lambasted, and that's so wrong. They get people say, I'm a digital camera expert for so many years. They weren't there. They didn't take the picture. This person is taking a picture. He didn't know how they were feeling, didn't know what time of day it was. I'm not saying ghost pictures are 100% genuine all the time. No, I'm not saying that. But they felt that they needed to share that picture, so you can give them the respect that they just offer your opinion, but say it in a nice way.
Oh, I completely agree. And I mean, that's one of the other reason really we started the show, was because there is so much judgment out there when people share their stories. And we wanted to create a safe space where there would not be any judgment, because we know firsthand some of the things we've seen. If we weren't there and we didn't see them ourselves, we wouldn't believe them if somebody else was trying to explain. We've seen stuff that looks like science fiction movie effects, for goodness sake. They sound so unbelievable. But we know what we saw, and we want to, really extend that, like you say, that respect to everybody else. You cannot pass judgment on somebody else's experience because you were not there.
Of course.
Just to get back to Bosworth Hall quickly, though, because you said something that was really interesting to me about the energy of the place, and how after having been away for a long time with the pandemic, it almost felt like there was so much activity and almost like they were missing you. And the fact that you pointed out that it is a living, breathing hotel. And obviously that creates a very different energy compared to, for example, a location where it's really only paranormal investigators that come in. So that it's really interesting to me, the contrast between somewhere like Bosworth Hall that you've investigated quite extensively, and then your experiences at somewhere like 30 East Drive, because 30 East Drive in Pontefract, which is often known as the Black Monk House, for anybody that hasn't heard of it in the 30 East Drive terms. That, as far as I'm aware, nobody lives there. The house is continuously almost paranormally investigated. And that's really all that happens there, is that people go in and they investigate the paranormal. So how different do you feel like do you think that makes a difference to the activity and the kind of energy that's in there? On the one hand, you've got a hotel where people are literally going about there every day, they're working, they're having holidays, and then you've got 30 East Drive where people are only going in trying to get stuff to happen. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does make sense, and I think it makes a bit of difference in terms. I mean, we have set rooms at Bosworth. The beauty of Bosworth Hall is we never know what rooms we've got until we get there, because of the rooms might have been booked by a late person wanting to book a room. So we never know, and that's what I love. I love the uncertainness of what we're going to get. And we've had people at Bosworth. We've had a briefing room where we welcome the guests and have a bit to eat, and then we have people walk in, just the hotel guests, and just walk in the room, and then think, "Oh, what's going on here?" And walk back out again. That's what I love about the unpredictability of it. But I think you're right. I think energy is a big player in and how you perceive that energy to be. I love East Drive, and you're right. It is investigated on a daily basis or every other day by teams who want to go there for that reason. Bosworth Hall is so different because when you've got Haunted Live and 25 guests just up the corridor, turn left, turn right, you've got maybe another 200 guests who are there not for that reason. And I think in my head, that makes a big energy, that makes a big difference. I always believe in laughter and humor and a buzz and a positivity can breed more energy and that kind of thing. You know, if I was a spook, if I was a spirit and I was hanging around this place and I saw somebody sat just calling out, I probably wouldn't be interested in doing anything. But if I'm seeing humor, if I'm seeing laughter, if I'm seeing energy, if I'm seeing smiley faces, I'm like, oh, what's this all about? I want to investigate.
I think that's so true.
Yeah, I can understand. I love East Drive. You won't get East Drive is one end of the spectrum, and Bosworth Hall is the other end of the spectrum. So, you know, I'm sure activity can happen. I mean, we have there's a story about East Drive where one team went there 13 times and nothing happened, and they got quite not annoyed is the wrong word. They were like, let's go one more time, and on the 14th time, it all kicked off, and it made them write a feature in the magazine a few years back.
I read that. I read that recently.
Yeah, how they've changed their mind on the paranormal on East Drive, and there's people out there who have a go at East Drive and have a go at locations. And that's, you know what, as I said before, you're entitled to your opinion, but if you've never been to East Drive and yet you're mocking it, I don't think that's fair, because you have to go to a location to give an opinion, in my opinion. If, you know, I know people have been to East Drive and nothing happened, but they have got and they've said that on social media, and they've told me that, and that's their right to say that. But if you've never been and you say East Drive is just a commercial thing, then I don't think you can say that. I don't think that's fair to say that.
I think, though, what you say about the energy you put into the place affecting what activity you get out is so true. That really resonates with me. And I think with the activity at 30 East Drive feels like, from what people say, it can be very contrary. You can have nothing, you can have everything. It can be nasty, it can be mild. But that to me that sounds a lot like how I would react if people were just coming in demanding that I perform for them all the time. If I was a house, sounds a bit weird, but if I was that house and that house has a personality, if people were just coming in all the time and just demanding that I perform, I would act just that as contrary.
I mean, you've got to think that the irony of 30 East Drive is that it was the place there, the house was a family house. And they were going about their normal business, and they were experiencing activity from the Black Monk or from Poltergeist. Whereas now it's like it's not a lived-in place. You're right. It's the place where people go to because of the history of the Poltergeist, and everything, the Pontefract Poltergeist. People go there to investigate. So it's a different kind of experience, because you go there expecting things to happen, or you go there with a history and the anticipation of it. But there's a story to the Pontefract house where it was a normal house, it was a normal lived-in house. A family lived there. A girl got some a poltergeist that wasn't very nice to them. And if you read the book by Colin Wilson on the story, it was a playful poltergeist. It wasn't always a nasty kind of entity. So have we built something up about the place? I love the place, don't get me wrong. We've had nights there where it's all kicked off, and it has been nasty. You mentioned nasty, and you mentioned mild and wild. It has been all those things. But like you said, if there's any kind of communication from the spirit world, the ghost world to us, if they are miffed off about what we're doing, then they've got a right to be angry, I guess. It's just all weird, isn't it? It's all weird. I mean, it's, I love Bosworth, I love Hinckley, I love East Drive. So three great locations, 3 different locations, but I love them all the same.
I think something you just said I've got to quickly go back to, because you said, have we created something? And it's just, I really wanted to say this about 30 East Drive, because there is sort of an emerging thought in the paranormal, and we've seen it pop up even in shows like Kindred Spirits and things like that. This thinking that maybe we're creating these ghosts. Somewhere like 30 East Drive, like, yes, there was a haunting there originally, but that, from what you've said, the type of haunting seems to have changed a lot now from the original. Is that because there are hundreds of paranormal investigators going in there with the idea that there's this nasty spirit in there? And essentially, we're kind of creating that activity. You know, we're making it happen because everybody is thinking about it and believing it. And this story is almost taking on its own form, its own consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're getting investigators there with levels of experience, with first timers. You have people out there. You've got also, we said that it might not be what's there already. It might be what you bring as well. You might bring some energy or some spirits or whatever to the location if they are following you or they are around you. So it's, I've got lots of respect for the place at 30 East Drive, and my experience of it is I've had some great nights there, some really good nights. But you mentioned about creating it. There's a thing called the Philip experiment. I don't know if you've heard about it or not. And
yes.
If you read that, and I know Morgan, one of our writers, Morgan, wrote a great feature of it in the magazine a few years back. And if you read about it, it's like you mentioned, it's creating something and then it happens. It's weird, isn't it? It's very weird.
Actually, talking about the Philip experiment and this kind of emerging idea in the paranormal of maybe we do create things. I think it's come full circle in a way, because the Philip experiment was back in the 70s. But I think that idea that we might actually be adding energy and sort of making these stories come to life, it didn't really catch on it didn't seem very much to catch on in the paranormal sort of community until more recently. I don't know why that is, but it seems to have sort of come full circle. But one of the other things I was going to ask was, with your work with the magazine, do you sort of see these new trends emerge? Because you see these experiments come out in like the paranormal shows, and then everybody's doing them, or you'll see, an idea like this kind of thought that maybe we were creating spirits, and then it sort of spreads through the community. Do you see any trends like that emerge through the magazine?
Maybe not trends, but I do see an audience increasingly wanting to find out more, and with lots of without disrespecting the ghost hunters of the past and the theories like the stone tape theory and residual energy, wanting to question that theory. Are we sort of like bred to believe that this is the theory and it should be that's the way, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say trends, but I think people are questioning more than ever before, which is great.
That's
I love
good.
people who question things, and and I think there's a lot of adoration for Victorian mediums, as much as some were fraudulent, and we've got a great feature in this issue about ectoplasm and the empowerment of women, how it sort of, ectoplasm was, soiled cheesecloth and potato starch, that kind of thing. It gave women a platform to have a voice, and it's a kind of, it's a great feature from Amanda Spook Eats, and I read it and I thought, wow, you know what, it's going to cause maybe a bit of conversation, but I kind of get it what she's saying, and I think if we don't discuss and we don't debate, then we'll never move forward. And I think the theories of the 50s and 60s and 70s, as great as they were at the time, maybe it's time to look at them and see if they still stand.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is one of the things I love about the paranormal field, is the fact that it's so dynamic. It's constantly evolving, and we absolutely do need to, pick this stuff up, give it a good old look, see if it's still relevant, and put our own take on it, a modern take on it. So I think that's fantastic.
I think we have to. I think I watched a video from a ghost hunt in the 70s. I think it was on BBC, and it was like, it was a typical British stiff upper lip, and and it was like, wow, this is what. But then let's not forget, in 1970s, when it was the 70s, that was the modern day. So we've adapted as people and as human beings. So it's only fair to say that the paranormal can do the same.
Yeah, I was watching something the other day, and it was very much, as you say, it was like sort of late 60s, early 70s, and there was the typical sort of British BBC announcer voice, and it was, and here the gentleman is setting up the high-tech reel-to-reel recorder. And I was like, oh.
Did he have a tweed coat with leather elbow patches?
He did
and
have leather elbow patches. I didn't see the pipe, but no, the glasses, it was definitely all that, but it was just so hilarious the way they were just...
Well, I was watching one from the 1950s. I think it was Essex Ghost Hunters in the 50s. And they were setting up, they went to a haunted house, and it was all men, no women at all men, which is so wrong. And they were like putting flour down on the floor for footprints, and they were attaching wires from mantelpiece to chair. And it's like, wow, you know, if you did that these days, you'd have a health and safety problem, wouldn't you? You know, people falling over the wires. But the gadgets of those days are not necessarily the gadgets that we would use now. So it's just, you know, we move forward as human beings, and it's, as I said before, it's only fair that the paranormal we can discuss and debate, rightly so, the paranormal.
So we've discussed how broad a spectrum the paranormal community covers and how wide-ranging the sort of facets and community within that is. It can probably feel a little bit overwhelming for anybody new to the field or anybody that's really interested in just getting into paranormal investigation. What would your advice be for anybody sort of new to this field and wanting to go on their first investigation?
I would say start local. I would say that wherever you're from, wherever you were brought up, I would say investigate that area, because there's so much history on your doorstep. There's so many things you can uncover at your local library or just online these days. You know, old pictures, old buildings. You might see a building that you walk past every day that looks so grand. It might be like a Wetherspoons or something these days. And yeah, it's, you know, 50, 60, maybe 100 years ago, it was something else, might have been a bank or something. And then even older might have been something else. So have a look at old maps, and you know, there's something beautiful to me about where you live, and whilst we're living in this modern age, you know, what you live in and what you walk to and where you walk now was not the same 100 years ago. So research local history, check the pubs in your area, check the history of the pubs, go and speak to the pubs if you know the landlords, and see if they know anything. There will be some, I guarantee there'll be some ghost stories, urban legends, myths, legends, bad stuff, good stuff in your local area.
Oh, I completely agree. I don't think there's a pub in England that isn't haunted.
No.
I agree. I mean, you know what? It was like, I do laugh when you I live in the most haunted town in the UK. And then someone said, no, actually, I live in the most haunted town in the UK. And it's like, well, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
I've never worked out what quantifies to be the most haunted place or the most haunted item.
We talked about this recently.
We did.
But also, have you noticed that it gets more and more specific now? Because before it used to be the most haunted village, and now it's like the most haunted village with 3 thatched cottages and 1 factory and a house with a blue door. It's just like, how can we make it so that this is the number one? It's like, what's
the most
different about
haunted
this
pub
village?
In the postcode of...
Yes, the most haunted pub that's 47.9 foot long and 28 feet wide. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe it is if you're going by those measurements.
It's just great. You know, it's the paranormal shouldn't be a competition, and sometimes it is a competition, and it shouldn't be. There's room for everybody. There's room for experts, non-experts. There's room for academia. There's room for parapsychologists. There's room for demonologists. There's room for everybody to have their say and have their opinion. I've been a long champion of people saying what they want to say with respect. That's the key word. You've got to respect people's opinions, and it's not always good. It's not always nice. And when it's bad, it needs to be called out. I agree, but on the whole, 99% of people are good and great, and long may that continue, because it's a great industry, a great sector, a great hobby to have.
And I think that kind of circles back to what appears to me to be like the ethos of the magazine, in that you're respectful and you're open, but most of all, it's fun.
Yeah.
It does seem that seems to be a core of the magazine, that it's not stuffy, that it's fun and enjoyable, and we're going to get onto your sense of humour in a moment, because there's something I need to speak to you about that. But keeping on the sort of vibe of fun, We often have what we call paranormal bloopers.
Oh,
where
yes.
we might think something is paranormal, or we get a story where somebody's like, oh, this amazing thing happened, and then it turned out to be entirely mundane.
In fact, we had one very recently in our house because our house, we do have paranormal activity in our house. And when we heard something scratching around in the bedroom recently in the middle of the night, we just assumed it was the ghost. However, it turned out it was not a ghost, and we had a mice.
It does sound odd to say, oh, well, we just assumed it was the ghost, because that's the most rational thing in the world. But,
that's the world we live in.
When stuff like that happens in this place, it is normally that sort of thing. But no, it was mice. So I'm presuming you've got to have a story like this.
Listen, I pull every enough to fill a whole show for you. A couple of years back, we Haunted Live did a live stream at a haunted hairdresser's close to where we live, where we're all from. And I got picked for some bizarre reason to do a lone vigil. So I remember I'm sat in this chair. And when you get that feeling that something's watching you, and you get that feeling where you just get, you get your hackles up and you get goosebumps. I'm sat there thinking, I'm saying to camera, I really feel like something is close, and I'm not a medium, and nothing. I'm not sensitive, nothing like that. But I kept saying, and I kept thinking, and then of course all the comments were coming back on the live feed. Yeah, there's something in the room, Paul. Something with you. Be careful. And I'm thinking, you know what? I kind of froze, and I'm thinking, I can see something in the corner of my eye, and I'm thinking, do I turn around? Do I call out? Oh. So I'm there like, what do I do? What do I do? This is live, this is not very good. It's me just sat there saying nothing. So I'm thinking, I've got to turn around. So, but I can see something in the corner of my eye. I'm thinking, what if it's something bad? I'll just scream and run out. So basically, I turned around, and it was a full length mirror, and it was me. I could see. It was me. I could see, because I was these hairdressers.
I've done that.
So I could see I could see something in the corner of my eye, thinking, that looks weird, because every time I move, it moves. And I never cottoned on to the fact it was a mirror. So I turned around my head slowly, and I could see my head reflecting, turning around towards me.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done that exact thing. It was the building I investigated with UK Haunted, actually, but it was an old people's home, very long corridors. At the end of each corridor was a mirror, and I used to look after empty buildings as a living, so I used to go to this place all the time. And I would come out of a room in the hall and look down to the far end, and I would see a figure moving, and it'd make me jump every time until I remembered, it's a mirror, it's you idiot.
We all make silly little errors from time to time, faux pas.
Oh, and that is the spice of life, isn't it?
Indeed. And whilst we're talking about embracing the silly, there's a question I've got to ask you, because if anyone follows you on Twitter, and I do recommend that they do, you are the king of dad jokes. Where do you get your dad jokes from?
Well, I'm a dad myself, so that makes sense. And I spent my life winding my kids up, and they're 14 now, bless them. I've got twin girls. They're 14, so I recycle old jokes. I look at something and see it's funny. Jokes should be shared. Jokes should be shared full time. And sometimes you see a joke and you think, oh, I can make that paranormal. So you'll sort of like, you'll spin it. So all my jokes aren't paranormal, but some are paranormal. And and the best jokes are, to be fair, the ones that people don't get. I've had jokes where people say, so it took me 2 days to get that joke. It took me 2 days.
Oh, yes.
Then I've had companies message me on Twitter saying, hey, we've got a problem with our computer. Because I put a joke about, I said, look, I've got a problem with my laptop. It's frozen. And every time I open it up, it plays Chasing Pavements, and I think it's a Dell. So I got a Dell PC. I got a Dell PC messaging saying, we've started a support ticket for you. And I'm like, people that know me just know that I enjoy having a laugh. I enjoy humor, I enjoy comedy, and we all have our role in the paranormal. And I like to embrace silliness.
And I think you really bring that sense of fun to the magazine. Not to say it isn't serious. There are serious articles in there. It's quite obvious that, the people that write that you can, it's possible though to be a serious paranormal investigator and to do this stuff genuinely and respectfully and still have fun and not take ourselves too seriously.
I said before, a lot of the features, if they're presented in a Word document, may not inspire people to read. If we can design it with a great design, if we can create a tagline to draw people in and give it a sense of that. And these features are great and they need to be read more. Some of the features that, we've got one in from Kieran and Iggy Pop this issue. And, it's about, do parapsychologists give the paranormal a better name? And it's quite an interesting feature. And it might not be read if Kieran just put it out in a paper and in his university working. So if we get the chance to do features like that and get a chance to design it in a way that it's really good and give it a headline, a tagline to it draws people in. Oh, what's this about? It sounds quite juicy. We will do it. The paranormal is we'll go back to what I said at the beginning. It's a roller coaster. It's a theme park of fun. But the magazine is not all humour. There are some serious points in there worth discussing, worth debating.
Yeah.
And, it's, you say I'm the king of dad jokes. My team will, Haunted Live will say, no, he's not. So, it just oh no, what did you say that for? But no, I just enjoy it. Humour's a big thing to me. It's been a big thing all my life as a kid. I've always loved humour and comedy and, I was brought up watching Lauren and Hardy on the old city reels, my granddad, Spike Milligan, and that kind of thing. I've always had that kind of spark in me. So, if it can make people laugh, make one person laugh, it's the job done.
Absolutely. So, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. We could have spoken for hours.
A long time.
Oh no, that's us as well. Every time we do an interview, we always say we have to sort of make ourselves release our guests back into the wild because we love nothing better than talking about the paranormal, and we could do it for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Well, the thing is, my conversation, I start off, I know what I want to say, but a bit like the paranormal, it goes down a rabbit hole, it ends up coming out completely different sometimes. Well, that's just, that's life in it, I guess.
Part of the joy of the paranormal
definitely
is the rabbit hole.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure. Hopefully I can see you guys in person at some point.
I really do hope
in
so.
the future. But it's a pleasure. I love podcasts. I love the modern paranormal in terms of how we can communicate more and how we can understand more and how we can spread the reach of the paranormal wide and far. And these podcasts and these shows are great. So well done to you guys.
Thank you. Well, where can people find Haunted Magazine?
Well, you can find the magazine now. Obviously, you can order online from us, hauntedmagazine.co.uk. But we are stocked in WH Smith's now, which is nice.
Excellent.
In the UK, we are stocked in Barnes and Noble in the US, which is nice.
And you do ship abroad, don't you?
Yeah, we are stocked in Chapters and Indigo bookstores in Canada. We've got stockists and distributors in the UK. You can buy it at Inkley at Haunted Antiques, Neil's place. We've got stockists in Australia and New Zealand. So it's quite nice. It's quite nice that it's growing. It's quite nice that there's some admiration for Haunted Magazine. And like you and like us, people get what we're trying to do. We're trying to be have some fun, but spread this paranormal stories and the great writers. And it's all about them, what they do and what they want to say. So, but anybody who wants to write, anybody. We've had first timers, we've had published authors. Please do get in touch. Just search for Haunted Magazine on social media, and we'll pop up.
And also, people can find on social media the live events that Haunted Live do.
Page there. To be fair, we've not done that many because of the pandemic, and it sort of like didn't do any for 18 months. We've done a couple of things, so we really need to get back to doing them again because we enjoy them. It's just getting us all together at some point. But so we do events at Inkley, midweek events, twice a month. Just search Haunted Live and Haunted Magazine. The events will pop up and you'll see us. It's Wednesday. I think it's Wednesdays, 2 Wednesdays a month at Hinkley, because obviously a lot of people have got busy lives, so they can't do weekends, and it's just 20 quid. We don't we're not an expensive place, and you get a good night, hopefully, and you enjoy it too.
Well, we're very much hoping that we get to join you for an investigation as well as just meeting you at some point in the future.
Nice.
But for now, thank you so much for joining us, and to everybody listening, go grab yourselves a copy of Haunted Magazine.
We highly recommend it.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to Paul for taking the time to speak to us. We had a wonderful time, and we're very much hoping to get on an investigation with you in future. But I'm afraid that brings us to the end of another episode of Not Once VS. Thank you so much for joining us, and remember that if you've had a paranormal experience, we would love to hear about it over at our website, notoncevs.com. A huge thank you to our patrons, KOFY and Repod supporters, without whom we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And don't forget that you can even check out our bonus content for 1 month free at the moment through Repod using the code FRIENDS at checkout when you become a member. This, of course, also includes our Zoom chat, so please do come along, say hello, and have a chat with us. Your support helps us to pay the costs of our web and podcast hosting, keep our software up to date, visit haunted locations, and pay for the kit to share that with you. And now it's helping us to build out the new KOFY studio so that we can bring you better content.
Bigger, better, faster,
stronger.
Not louder.
Not Once VS is produced by my production company Narrative Audio, and if you have a podcast and would like to outsource your editing and post-production, then please do get in touch either through Not Once VS or narrativeaudio.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll join us again for some more spooky stories and haunted history on the next Not Once VS.